start. We're a little bit behind, but that's all right. I think we're good. I'm Travis Dunn. I'm the owner of Midworld Press, and we're talking today with Laurie R. King. She is the author of the Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes books, of which we're doing a collector's edition of the first one. That's The Beekeeper's Apprentice, and the subtitle is, what is the subtitle? Or I always forget the order that the words go in.
With
Or
some notes upon the segregation of the
The
Queen,
Segregation of the Queen. Yes, exactly. Which is
which which is the title of Sherlock Holmes's book on beekeeping.
beekeeping. Yeah.
So, he and I share the subtitle. So
Excellent. Excellent. Just as a side note, have you ever done any beekeeping? Is that an interest you have, or is that just because of the Sherlock Holmes?
it's only the last year or so that I've actually lived at home long enough to have bees,
Yeah.
because usually I tend to travel a lot, and if you are a traveler and you come home to a beehive, you'll often find it gone because
Oh,
they
really?
so they move on.
They just move
So,
on if
unlike although Sherlock Holmes often seems to have people taking care of his bees according to the Russell book. So
right.
what I
Which is
need is
nice. It's
a
nice to have people that you can
what I need
count
is a
on.
Sherlock Holmes. But at the moment where I'm living is it just doesn't have. I mean, it's not really bee country because we're
Hmm.
surrounded by redwoods and oaks,
Oh,
and
okay.
there's not much for bees to
So
really. I mean, they
they're
do.
looking for things to pollinate, I guess, or to,
They're a little more interested in yeah, but
flowering things, and yeah. So okay. All right. Just as a side note. I, so to start out, we're doing it was intended to be a 30th anniversary edition of The Beekeeper's Apprentice, the first Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes book, and we're still within a year or so of that. There's been some delays, obviously. People have asked about it. Obviously, they've been asking you about it. I've gotten some emails about it. So just to let people know, we're still doing it, still coming. It's going to be nice. It's beautiful. The artwork is beautiful. We've got a new dust jacket, new interior art for it. Uh, so some of the delays have
I've
been
got
due
the
to,
dust jacket posted. It's sticking up
yeah, yeah,
behind.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the cards that, yeah, we made for the dust jacket. Great art by Grace Aldrich.
Yeah.
She did a really good job on it, and as well as the interior art. So yeah, but we've had some delay. It was intended to be out well before now, but so the tariffs have been a little bit of an issue. We've been kind of waiting to see how that pans out, especially
May
since
may
the
you live
original.
in interesting times,
We
right?
Yeah, we do, and I wish I'm okay with being bored sometimes, but
Please, just bore me, would you?
yeah, it'd be nice for a change. So I mean, we feel like we've got that ironed out as far as that goes. I've had some other issues with the printer, so we're actually looking at a different printer right now, but it's still a go. It's still going to happen. It's just delayed. So hopefully within the next, 2 or 3 months, we'll have a finished book. We'll be sending out people's pre-orders that they've made. So don't give up hope. We're still on track to get it done. We're just
Yeah.
running well behind of what we
Yeah, I mean,
wanted
it's
to.
just
So
been such a crazy time because,
yeah,
unless
it's
you happen to get it out. I mean, originally you were hoping to get it out before the end of December, which,
yeah, right. We were
a
yeah.
small print run on a big press it's kind of understandable that they don't rush to
Yeah, I
do
mean
it.
there was a good chance we could have gotten it done. It just yeah, things just didn't fall into place like they should have, and it's
Yeah.
like I said, just the things that have been going on, uh, you know, economically and things like that. It was just, it's just things that have been unforeseen that have
Yeah,
caused
I
some
mean,
problems.
who
But
who
it's
can possibly run a small business in this climate? You just one
yeah,
week to the
well,
next. Am I
you'd have to
here?
be
Am I there?
crazy to try
And
it.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and once you have put something down for pre-orders, you set the price,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you can't very well say,
You
well, it's
can't, yeah, you can't go back to people and say, "Oh, hey, I need an extra 20 bucks from you for for something
no,
that you pre,
no.
you just
I mean,
obviously you can't do that. It's
granted,
not.
my readers would probably give it to you, but still,
I,
it's not really a
I mean, it would be great it's just not, it wouldn't be right, obviously, and it's just not, I mean, you're not going to be able to run a business for long if you do, if you keep doing stuff like that. But,
yeah,
yeah,
no,
again, interesting times. So, um,
yes.
So the first thing I want is I've read some interviews with you and some things in the past about, your kind of how you came about writing a Sherlock Holmes, whatever you want. I guess pastiche is what they call them or whatever, which is kind of I don't know if that's exactly right, but I mean, my understanding is you weren't necessarily like a big Sherlock Holmes fan, that maybe you'd read some of the stories, but you weren't a member of the Baker Street Irregulars or anything like that, that you were,
No, no, at the time. No, I think that it was in the late 80s, and I did not have a television set at the time. I had two small kids, and my mother lived next door, and so she had the sort of communal television set that the kids
Okay.
could watch Star Trek on, and and Reading Rainbow.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And she and I used to watch the Masterpiece Theater, the mystery thing on PBS, and it happened to be one of those times when they were doing the Jeremy Brett things.
Right,
And so it was on my mind in a way that it hadn't been since, reading whatever it is you read in high school,
right.
um, Speckled Band and Hound of the Baskervilles and whatever.
Yeah,
But I think that Holmes is a character that is so permeated culture in
yeah,
general that
yeah.
you don't really need to have read the stories
No,
recently, or certainly all of them, to
right.
have a very clear picture of who he is.
Yeah, because even people who haven't read the stories, I mean, you could say Sherlock, and everybody knows who Sherlock Holmes is. They may not know, all the little details, but even if they haven't read the stories, they've been, even in America, where, I mean,
Yes, I read some at some time that the silhouette of him, the man with the
yeah,
pipe, is the most recognized image worldwide
right. As a
of any
silhouette. Yeah,
fictional character,
yeah,
which is very true.
yeah,
But I thought I can't really write a story about Mary Russell that starts out, I was 15 when I met Sherlock Holmes. 15 years old with my nose in a book as I walked the Sussex Downs and nearly stepped on him. I couldn't very well write a book like that and not know Sherlock Holmes a little better than I did.
right. Yeah,
So I popped out to the local bookstore and bought, I think it was the Dover edition. It was a mass market size paperback
yeah,
that was, that
yeah.
thick, two volumes, short stories and novels in tiny, tiny print, that I certainly couldn't manage now.
Yeah, me neither.
And so I actually met Sherlock Holmes as an adult. I
Yeah.
came to the stories not as a kid, which I think a lot of people do because they're generally considered kids' adventure stories.
Yeah, I remember reading some, I didn't tear through them, but as a child I read there at least two or three of them for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But I read them as an adult, and I came across the character, uh, um, as as somebody who'd sort of been there.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated because you tend to have this cliche of Sherlock Holmes as being this thinking machine who has no friends. He's only interested in ideas. He's doesn't like women at all. All the things that are sort of just two-dimensional about the
Yeah.
character. And what I found in those pages was someone far more complex and definitely three-dimensional. He had a sense of humor that was quite unexpected. He had a loyalty to friends such as Watson and Mrs.
Watson.
Hudson that was very real and quite profound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought this is a character that is worth spending time with.
Yeah. He wasn't just a cardboard cutout or yeah.
No,
Yeah, a
no.
caricature.
And I found it interesting later when I learned that Arthur Conan Doyle considered him a lesser character in
Yeah.
among the the literary works that he had done
Yeah.
because
But
he,
he's the one that's most well known. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know that I could name another Conan Doyle, I mean, I know
Well,
there are others, I know, but I couldn't.
Professor Challenger. Yes, yes.
Professor Challenge.
And but I mean, in fact, those other characters I find rather cardboardy
Mm,
because he put so much effort into them
yeah.
that they were so important for him that
That,
his knack for just writing simple prose
yeah.
buries the actual
Right.
beauty of what he's doing.
Yeah.
But with the Holmes things, they're written at speed. Written as entertainment and as something that's lively. They're written to sell because
Yeah.
he was trying to make a living.
Yeah.
And mine
He kind of had to crank them out, didn't he, at a certain pace to keep. Yeah.
at certain
Yeah.
points, and
Yeah.
he at one point he got sick and tired of Holmes, killed him off,
Yeah.
and was forced to bring him back
Yeah.
because he couldn't pay the bills. He had a
Right.
sick wife and kids to
Yeah.
support and all the
The,
rest of it, and
the
so he
famous
brought him
fight on
back.
the falls or whatever that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He survived the Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah.
But what I had in mind was a sort of coming of age story of a young woman. Um, and I thought to have a person like that who is patterned on the mind of Holmes, if
Yeah.
they have very similar minds,
Yes.
wouldn't it be more interesting to look at her actually side by side with Holmes rather
Yeah.
than setting her in, 1980s Watsonville, which is where I was writing? The character herself would have been interesting, but the
Sure.
setup would not have been.
Right.
So I put the two of them side by side, and they are, as I said, basically, I wouldn't say they're the same character, but they have
No, but they're
the
very
mechanics
similar.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, and the mechanics of their mind
Yeah.
is the same.
Yeah.
The details of their upbringing and their social status and the rest of it is very different, but they are similar and different enough to be really interesting and really interesting to write because I get to play with her challenging him to do better,
Right.
which he hasn't been. Watson was many things, but he did not challenge Sherlock Holmes intellectually.
No, Watson seemed to be more of a, I think maybe he kind of lifted Holmes up socially, maybe, or, from an emotional standpoint, maybe
Yeah,
kind of opened him up a little bit. But yeah, he obviously and was never meant to be like on a just pure mental level,
yeah,
you know, challenging for Holmes. But
yes, they were.
Mary seems to be, in even at the beginning when she's only 15, she kind of meets him on his own, the meeting there on the downs. She doesn't back down even when she figures out who she's talking to. She still, you know, she doesn't wilt. She continues to meet him face to face and word for word, it feels like, yeah, that she's
Yes, yes. There was a discussion there's a Facebook group called the Beekeeper's Apprentices.
okay.
And this morning, somebody had brought up the fact that I dropped these what they call Easter eggs into
Yes.
things. And the one that they mentioned was when she's at university, and she pops next door to ask somebody named Dot if I forget what she's asking her, but uh, are you doing anything tonight? And Dot says, no, I'm just going to hell with Dante. Uh, and the woman had read the book a number of times without realizing that, of course, is Dorothy L. Sayers.
Right.
And I mean, that kind of thing is such fun to do as a
Yeah.
writer. You drop these things in there, knowing that one person in 10,000 is going to catch
Is
it.
gonna get it. Yeah.
But so long as it doesn't delay things,
Yeah.
it moves it right along.
Because even if you don't get it, it doesn't hurt the story any. It's just kind of a neat little thing when you do discover it that, oh,
And
that's where
similarly,
that's from. Yeah.
there's a lot of Sherlock Holmes references that I
Yeah.
work in that again, if you know the stories, you will say, "Hey, I recognize that."
Yeah.
But if you don't, it's just their conversation and you go on.
Right. It's
So
just part of the story.
I have a lot of fun writing my books.
Well, I mean, that's great though. I mean, that's just kind of neat to be able to kind of, I mean, do you kind of like in the back of your mind while you're writing, or is it usually just something that kind of pops up as you're writing that, oh, hey, I could put this in here, or is that something that you start out to do when you write a story, or is it just kind of
Well,
like, well, this would fit in here, I'll stick it in here?
it sort of depends.
Yeah.
When I was writing The Moor, The Moor
Yeah.
is set on Dartmoor. It's all
Mhm.
about the Hound of the Baskervilles. So
Yeah.
obviously, it's going to be permeated with what's going
References.
on
Yeah.
in the Conan Doyle story.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the people who are devout fans of Laurie King
Yeah.
love to go back and read the originals,
Right.
such as The Hound of the Baskervilles, reading
Yeah.
that after you've read the Moor, and then read it again and say,
See what's in.
I get that.
Okay. Yeah.
And with The Game, which is set in India,
Yeah.
then you go back and reread Rudyard Kipling's Kim,
Ah, okay.
find what I was doing in the story, which
Right.
you don't have to know because I mean it helps to know that there is a Rudyard Kipling story about a
Sure.
young boy who works for the British government named Kim, but
Right.
you don't have to remember it. But
Yeah.
I
It's
love doing stuff
it's
like that. The
extra icing for the cake. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well, no, that's great though. I mean, because it's always fun to just, I mean, you always feel kind of like, oh, that's cool that I caught that. And like you said, and if you don't catch it and you don't know, you don't know the difference and it doesn't matter, but it's just kind of neat to be able to say, oh,
the,
hey, I know where that came from, or yeah,
the
exactly.
Easter eggs stay hidden for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's part of the fun, especially with a character like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the kind of perks of having a character that's been around that long is that you've got kind of a really rich background to play off of or to, kind of a,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you can tell when you're reading a book when the author is having fun.
yeah,
So,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know, I know it just depends on the writer. I guess there's a lot of people that say, well, writing is some of the hardest work that they've ever done, which I don't necessarily disagree. I can understand how it would be a difficult thing, but it almost sounds like some writers think that it's a slog and they do it just because,
yeah, I
and I don't know. I mean, I guess I kind of believe him, but I kind of don't because I'm like, well, would you keep doing it though if it was that bad? And I don't, and I'm not, and that's not to minimize it in any way to say that there aren't parts of it that are difficult. Obviously, there must be, yeah, but
yeah, but I think there's an awful lot of writers, not so many mystery writers. I mean,
yeah,
genre is its own thing, but
sure.
if you're a capital L literary writer, especially if you're a male, I'm sorry, Travis, but
I understand. I get it.
there's this tendency to make the whole process of writing something superhuman of
Right.
like the one saying I has been credited to about 10 different writers of writing is simple. You just sit down at the typewriter and open a vein.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a struggle. It's painful. It's yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
if it was that painful, you honestly you wouldn't do it because
yeah.
there's not
Why would you
that
keep
much
doing
money
it?
in
Yeah, especially if you
it.
didn't have to. Yeah.
No, no. And I mean, I think that writing, one of the joys of writing is that it is sometimes hard. It's a
Yeah.
challenge and it really makes you sit. At, at the moment, I am a writer who does who rarely does any kind of outline.
Oh, okay.
At the most, if I'm doing one that's more of a kind of thriller pacing, because with
Yeah.
that you have to have a very tight pace.
To keep up the
I will,
suspense.
especially when I'm coming to a key point, I will make like a half page thing where I'm keeping track of first this, then that person finds out that,
Right.
then this person sees that. And so that I know where everything is going. Because
Yeah.
otherwise it means that the rewrite is messy because you have to follow a certain pattern.
A certain pattern, right?
But I'm working on I don't know, what is it, my 30th book, my 35th? I don't know what it is. But
What
I'm
you
working on
there are 19 Russell novels, is
well,
that
there are
right?
19 Russells, and
Okay.
there's
And then you've
five
got
Martinellis, and
right.
there's two standalones,
So
and there's I mean, there's five standalones, and there's anyway.
yeah.
So there's 30 odd books.
30-ish, yeah, 30 odd books.
And and this book I'm working on for next year, I've got a 4-page outline, an
Oh,
actual bulleted outline that I'm doing because I need to know how it's working, partly
okay.
because I'm drawing from a book that is in existence. So I have to make sure that I get the stuff that's mentioned in
Right.
there into the. So I
Yeah,
look
you
at
want
this
it
thing
all to
and I think,
match up.
Laurie, what is your brain doing with this one? So it's an interesting process, is writing. You never quite know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard writers say that every you write every book once and then you start all over again. You learn how to write the
Yeah.
book as you're writing it,
Yeah.
basically, yeah,
Yeah.
each one.
The book is the rewrite.
Yeah,
And it's for people like me who normally don't do any kind of outline.
right.
The first draft is tells me what the story wants to be.
Yeah,
It's not readable. I give it to my editor and nobody else because nobody will make sense of it.
right.
There's plot lines that just drop. There's other plot lines that start up. There's characters that come and go and they
Yeah,
change midstream and all the rest of it. But it's you can see my
yeah,
brain thinking, now that has to move, and then but
yeah,
when I go back, I will then know what the end needs to look like,
right.
and I will work towards that. So the
Yeah, it's a
first
refinement
draft,
process.
first draft takes me 3 or 4 months. The rewrite takes me 4 or 5 months. It's
Yeah.
almost always a longer process because it has to make the book actually work. So
Yeah, you basically kind of got to take it apart and then put it back together again, I guess, or in
yeah,
the right way.
yeah, yeah. It will remain to be seen whether having an outline will make life any easier for me.
It may be the last time you try that.
God, this is even worse.
This is terrible. Yeah. So I don't know how much you can say about this when you're working on it. Is it a standalone or is it a
It's the second in the Raquel Lang. I
okay?
decided to start a new book during COVID because why not?
Sure. What else?
So I
What else
start
you
a new
gonna do?
series. So you hit, your late 60s and you think, I want to do something new. So I started the Raquel Lang came out a couple years ago called Back to the Garden.
Yeah.
And I got I worked my way all the way through the first draft and realized that basically I've rewritten Sherlock Holmes again. I can't get away from him
It's a hard habit to break.
because she's a very Holmesian type person.
Yeah,
She's obviously neurodivergent in some
sure.
way. I mean, I don't go into the details of what her diagnosis would be because I think for the purposes of the novel, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
At least it hasn't to this point. I mean, it may be at some point, but um, it's I think that I mean, I'm not opposed to diagnoses for anything, in case
sure. Yeah,
anyone's
but
wondering. And sometimes, sometimes neurodivergence causes problems, but other
yeah,
times, I mean,
it's
we all know and love weird kids.
oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've
Some
got a
some of us
number of
were
them
weird
in my
kids.
family. And you know that if they ever, were taken to have the full, full workup for
Yeah,
they'd have a list of things, but
sure.
if it's not getting in their way, they're doing fine. So,
Yeah, I mean
and that's
it's yeah,
kind of what I'm doing with this character is
it's
when you read her, you know what her problem is.
yeah,
But if it's not a problem for her, then
it's not
why?
a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm enjoying her. The thing with the first one was, and we're kind of getting off the beekeeper
No, no,
track
that's fine. That's fine.
considerably, but when I wrote her the first time, there were a lot of details because I don't do outlining, a lot
Right.
of details about her I didn't know. And when I went to do the rewrite, I figured I would fill in all her backstory, all her, her home life and the rest of it. And I found that every time I started doing that, I just felt resistance
Yeah.
that she didn't want to be explained. And when I got to the end of the rewrite, I found that there was almost nothing of her other than what this story was taking her and how
Right.
vivid or lack thereof she is on the page. So this that was kind of interesting because I hadn't intended that, but it is very Holmesian because Conan Doyle tells us nothing about Sherlock Holmes either.
Yeah.
But this book tells is all the rest of it. I mean, it's all her home life because there's a lot of stuff that has actually led into where the first book in the series
Right.
was,
Was, yeah.
but is only sort of obliquely referred to.
Right.
Whereas this one, it's central. So this one, it's all Raquel all the time. But it's anyway, it's proving interesting. So
Well, that's good. I mean, at least I mean, I guess if nothing else, you'll find out whether you like the outlining part of it and you're enjoying it. So that's, I mean,
well, we'll see how far I get with the outline before I just sort of say, "Oh, this is yeah,
yeah,
yeah."
it's worth a
I,
shot.
I am actually doing writing as well, but
Yeah,
it's
but
just I
just
got to
trying
a
to
certain
keep
point
track
in
of
the
all the,
writing where I realized that it's not. I can't go any further if I don't know where this is coming from and where this is going to.
yeah,
So, anyway, but when I started writing the series, I had no idea of where these characters were going. I mean,
yeah,
The Beekeeper's Apprentice is a very episodic book. It,
yeah, it
it's
is. Yeah,
it's by definition, it's her apprenticeship.
yeah,
And so you start out with them meeting and them starting with some kind of silly little cases, and then they get a little more serious, and then they
right,
become very serious.
right, yeah,
And it, my first draft of the thing was not really a novel. It was a series of sort of glued together short stories. And without giving spoilers for, I can't imagine anyone watching this without having read it, um,
just in
but
case.
there's a case that comes fairly early in their career
Right.
that they don't quite solve and don't realize that it is the same case that ties together
Yes.
the whole book.
Right. Yeah.
And
And
that didn't exist in the first draft. It was just
oh, okay.
there was the case with the ham and the case with the spies and the case with
Right.
the senator's daughter, and then
Yeah.
but it wasn't until I realized that I was trying to write a novel that I could tie it together.
Tie it together. Yeah.
For those of us who never took writing classes,
You're
um,
you're learning on the job.
yeah, and a lot of us, especially in genre, um, learned to write by reading. And
Yeah.
I was in my 30s when I started actually writing. I think an awful lot of us do that.
Yeah.
Having played with the idea for a while, you sort of one day sit down and think, well, maybe I can do this.
Sure.
So,
And you can, but yeah, it's not necessarily what you thought it might it might be. It's always a little bit
and you just,
it's just like any job, I guess. You don't know the ins and outs of it until you sit
oh
down
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about reinventing the wheel. I can remember something I did in uh, a, I think it was A Grave Talent, the first book published, the third book written,
Yeah.
that I had I can't even remember what it was, but something happened and then it was revisited a number of chapters later.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later I found out that that was called foreshadowing and everybody did it.
You thought you had
So
discovered
clever. Look what I've done here.
it.
You think,
I mean, you know.
okay.
Well, I mean, at least you know you were on the right track then, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well.
I wanted to ask you about just going back to Sherlock Holmes again, just what are your thoughts about some of the, I guess I'd say more recent incarnations of Holmes? You know, obviously you've got Benedict Cumberbatch who's done kind of a modern TV show of Sherlock. Um, you've got the Robert Downey Jr. ones that Guy Ritchie directed that are a little more action oriented. I don't know what kind of exposure you have to any of those, but if you do, what are your thoughts on some of the other takes of Sherlock
Yeah,
Holmes?
I don't read pastiches, other people's pastiches,
Yeah,
because they get in my head, and then I
right.
can't remember if it's something I wrote or Conan Doyle wrote or
Sure.
somebody else wrote, and my brain
Yeah.
is just blows up. But yeah, I think I've probably seen most of those. I've even seen the elementary ones, I think most of them.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, I
Um,
forgot about that one. Yeah.
yeah, I was Jeremy Brett, and for me, Jeremy Brett and I think he did such a fine job
Yeah.
of capturing the Conan Doyle Holmes,
Yeah.
that brittle
Agreed.
energy
Yeah.
of somebody who is just too much for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
The other ones have all been different takes. And I mean, Robert Downey's things are just, they're jokes, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's great fun to watch him
It's
with Jude Law.
basically Sherlock Holmes as a kind of an action movie,
Yeah,
or it's
yeah.
not really.
And they're
Yeah.
fine, but
Yeah.
they're not really Sherlock Holmes. Um,
Yeah.
and the Benedict Cumberbatch ones, I love the actors and I love the cleverness of them. The plots are terrible. I mean, the plots are just embarrassing.
Yeah.
Um,
They're almost kind of. I don't want to say soap opera-ish, maybe isn't right, but they're almost too. To me, it always felt like they were trying to be too smart for their own good and do something
yeah,
that's just
yeah, and they're
almost, yeah,
yeah. When you,
impossible. Yeah.
and I think that the first one with the taxi driver who
Mhm.
was the bad guy
Yeah.
is a perfect example because everybody knew what. I mean, it had to be the taxi driver. Who else
Yeah.
could it be? And he's sitting there looking at the taxi and he doesn't realize it until the end. And you think,
Totally.
really? Even I got that one, and I'm no Sherlock Holmes. Um, but that's not what they're doing. And the
Yeah.
fact that they are trying to put it in a modern London, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
And Cumberbatch I love him. The
Great actor. Yeah.
partnerships there, I think, and Mrs. Hudson is so great.
Hmm. Yeah. She's,
So I have no problems with any of those.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was just kind of interesting to see the different. And like you said, yeah, some of them I guess are maybe better than others. I agree. I've always been a Jeremy Brett. To me, that was like even some of the older ones that were good. Some of the older black and white movies. Some of the other actors did a great job, but I always just felt like he was, in my mind, that he's more like what I had envisioned Sherlock Holmes as.
yeah,
Than probably just about anybody else. Yeah,
yeah.
that I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
I saw him, in fact, I saw him twice do Holmes on the stage, Jeremy.
Oh,
And it was interesting because the energy on stage is so intense
yeah,
compared with the screen that you could see how he was bringing that stage actor energy onto a television program. And it really worked. I think you could
yeah,
really feel it in a way that you don't when people are just, not just, but
yeah.
when they're
Watching on a
only
screen.
accustomed to acting in front of a camera.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's just a different style and a different, like, kind of like you said, a different intensity where I guess and they've kind of got an audience to play to and off of, and it's probably just a whole different vibe, I would imagine.
And there's no getting around the fact that Jeremy Brett did have problems that were very similar to that of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was playing a part that he felt.
Felt, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was very close to, yeah. So,
Yep.
so let's see what else. Oh, so we wanted to talk a little bit about the artwork for this
Well,
edition of the
I would
Beekeeper's
be interested
Apprentice.
in the whole process of. I mean, start. You tell me. You answer a question for me, Travis. Now, there's a million great books out there, and there's a million
There are. Yeah.
books that have, people who are passionate about them enough that they would maybe
Sure.
purchase an illustrated edition.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you're choosing those? Because if anyone goes on the Midworld Press
Yeah.
page, you'll see there's a wide variety of books there.
Yes.
They're not
Yeah.
all Sherlock Holmes mysteries.
No, 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 not at all. Not even close.
Yeah,
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I have a good answer for it other than I'm terrible at branding, and so I just go with stuff that I like, which is probably a terrible thing to do as far as a business because I don't really have I'm not oh, this is all, Sherlock Holmes pastiches, or this is all, it's not even all detective novels or crime novels, or
yeah,
they're books that I have read that have just stuck with me for whatever reason. It's your book, I read it years ago. I mean, I bought a copy at it. I think the first version I read was a paperback copy that I bought at a used bookstore. And I just used to go, I mean, I'm one of those people that would just go into a bookstore and just look and just look and just look. And I think I just picked it up off the shelf and I saw that it was a Sherlock Holmes book, and which yeah, I like Sherlock. Again, I've never been like a super Sherlock Holmes fan, but I was like, oh, this sounds cool. It's got this young girl in it that is equal to Holmes as far, it just sound, I read the synopsis, of course, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds cool. So I read it and I loved it. I mean, it was yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where you can't really describe to somebody like, oh, why did you, or what, why do you like one of your kids, or why do you like, it's just hard to put into words because it was, I don't know. I just felt like it was Sherlock Holmes, but it was different enough, and it hit some notes to me that just stuck with me. It was, you've got this girl who's 15 years old who's at least as smart as him, you know, so that was kind
So,
of neat just to read that, you've got somebody who's kind of his equal, who's still learning from him, but she's also teaching him a few things, as well that she's,
yeah,
and I will even say that I always felt like Mary was probably even more intelligent than Holmes, at least in certain ways. Yeah, I mean, I would never say that like on the Facebook group or whatever, but I feel like she's actually smarter than him. I mean, he's obviously got time on his side. He's got more experience, but I just always feel like she's
my
actually probably a step ahead of him.
my original publisher, St. Martin's Press, there someone very clever in their marketing department came up with the advertising phrase that I have just shamelessly stolen and reused all over the years. Introducing the world's greatest detective and her husband, Sherlock
Sherlock
Holmes.
Holmes. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because it's
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind of
So, I mean,
it's
Midworld Press has been around for how long?
probably 5 years, give or take.
Yeah,
It's
because
yeah. I think it not
I mean,
the
you wrote to
2020. I
my
think our first book came out. Yeah, so
yeah, because you wrote to me about a year or so ago
yeah,
and asked about because the way the publishing world works, for those of you who are watching, when somebody wants to do a project like this, they have to
yeah,
pay the publisher rights to things,
right,
and I
yeah,
get a portion of that, they get a portion of it,
yeah,
and that's how we started. And then
yeah,
you sent me, seems to me you had three or four different
yeah.
artists that you had used.
There were probably three or four. There were and for the life of me, I can't even remember who the other ones were. I mean, they were all good artists.
Mhm.
And I'm not even sure that Grace was in that first, because I'm not even sure I knew about Grace at the time. I think maybe I'll get on like Instagram and scroll through artists, you know, accounts on Instagram just to see if there's somebody. And I think I just happened to come across her Instagram account and looked through it, and I was like, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I just
and
felt like
I
she would be kind of cool for Sherlock Holmes,
yeah, I liked her style and also liked the fact that it was a woman. I thought that would
yeah,
be an
yeah, I think that
interesting
was because I
dimension.
think the other two were male
Mhm.
artists, and it just kind of felt more correct. Yeah, that
Yeah.
her, and again, not that the other ones were bad or there was
Oh, they
anything
were
wrong with
great.
them. She just kind of felt like
Yeah.
she had that kind of because I
So,
think in a lot of respects, also the first Mary Russell book is it's got a little bit of a creep factor to it just because of the villain and who they end up being and how they kind of ended up being. And I
mhm,
felt like she kind of got that down, that she had that kind of that menace to her artwork
yeah.
of, hey,
Yeah.
something's going on, something's not right, and we don't know what it is, kind of thing to it. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I was curious about, and I don't think I ever asked her, was there's four illustrations in the book. They all
Hmm.
illustrate different scenes.
Yeah.
Um, did you talk to her about the scenes that she was illustrating, or does it just something she chose when she read it?
I mean, we did talk about it, but they were all scenes that she chose. So and I love when an artist, because not all artists even want to read the book when they do artwork. Sometimes they just say, hey, send me a written brief of which is fine. Everybody works different, and not everybody's a reader, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do love it when an artist says, yeah, I want to read the book because
Mhm.
I want to know. And
Yeah.
I feel like the artwork, it may just be something in my brain, it may not even be reality, but I just feel like the artwork is better when it comes straight from the artist, what they've read, and this is what they envisioned.
Hmm.
and it's what they're putting on the paper. I always feel like if I have to read the book and then tell somebody, hey, here's what I want you to illustrate, I feel like, it's kind of like that telephone game where you lose something every time. So I feel like I'm being kind of a middleman,
Yeah.
and we're losing something in the artwork in between, the book and me and then the artist. So
Yeah.
I would just, and so she read the book and she came back and said, well, here are the scenes I think that we should, these are the ones that struck me as what we needed to illustrate. And, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth because I was like, well, yeah, those all sound great. That's perfect. So basically it was just kind of a, yeah, go for it. Those are the ones you like, let's do it. And we always do sketches first so we can send them to the author. And I think we sent you sketches and said, hey, is this
Yeah.
okay? Does this look like what you want to do? And I think you were fine with, I don't know that there were any major changes that we made to anything.
Yeah, I
Um,
think there were minor tweaks in
yeah, I think the one map behind the senator's wife, maybe we changed to a map of Cardiff instead. I think it was a London map originally, and you were like,
yeah,
"Well, this is in Wales.
yeah,
We should probably have it." Yeah, but yeah, it wasn't anything. Yeah, I don't think we changed anything major. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, she read the book and she was just like, "Oh, this." I mean, it wasn't even like a conversation. She wrote me an email and said, "Well, here's what I would like to see, but I'm open to doing whatever you guys want." They all sounded good to me, so I just said, "Yeah, just go ahead and do it."
there we go.
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, to me that always seems to work out better. I've worked with, and again, not that it's bad or wrong or whatever. It's just there are artists that just want to, tell me what you want me to illustrate, and I'll do it instead of hey, and I don't know. I just, again, not to knock anyone's process or anything, but I just always feel like maybe I'm not a good interpreter of what
yeah,
I always feel like I'm not, am I missing something or am I not explaining this correctly? And then if they do a piece of artwork and it's not you know, up to what it should be, I always feel like, well, could I have explained this better, or, would they have had a better, idea if they had actually read the book? But I
yeah,
mean, that's just kind of one of my, things about it. But
it is interesting working with it's sort of like the process for cover art.
yeah,
Of course, in the publishing world, I don't think you'd find very many cover artists who actually read the book because how can they? They'd spend
you're not
their
going to have
life
time.
reading books and they'd never
Yeah,
do cover art.
yeah,
So, but to try and get across a vibe as well
yeah,
as the sort of image is always difficult. And as the writer, I always am aware that I'm going to have people say to me, "But that doesn't look anything like Mary Russell." And yeah,
yeah.
it's okay.
I mean, yes, you have that, and I get it. I mean, I get it because everybody's got this picture in their mind that is, this is what Mary Russell or this is what Sherlock Holmes looks like. But if you compared it to somebody else's, they may not, I mean, everybody's got their own image in their head, and so that's always a difficult proposition because some people are going to go, yeah, that's pretty close to what I had imagined, and some people are going to go, that doesn't look anything like like what she's supposed to look like. And so yeah, I mean, you're just never going to make everybody happy. So
Yeah,
you've kind of got to go with,
yeah.
okay, unless there's just something blatant like, oh, she was described as having, blonde hair throughout the book, and you've painted her with dark brown hair, then okay,
Well,
we need
that
to change the color of her hair, or
yeah,
whatever.
yes,
But unless it's something just so specific that it's going to cause people to go, well, that I didn't even know who that was because then you just got to go with it. And I have worked with authors who have asked me like, hey, if you illustrate characters, you know, is there a way you can work it around so their features aren't shown, because I want people to be able to, and I get that. I want, basically I want people to be able to stick with whatever they've imagined,
isn't
and
that why there's so many books that show, women from the back and that
yeah,
kind
from the
of thing?
back, or
Yeah,
their face is half in shadow, or
and I
whatever.
don't think I've ever had a cover image of Russell that has her with glasses on.
Hmm.
She wears glasses.
Yeah, yeah,
She's nearly blind without them, so she
right.
sometimes takes them off. when she has an but she can't see, and so she
Yeah,
wears glasses. But there's not a single cover out there that
that
shows
has
a
her.
woman with spectacles on. So
I wonder, I mean, again, you've got this whole sales and branding kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, she's not as attractive with glasses on, so we can't have, it's like, who, that, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, okay,
and
whatever.
not being an artist, I don't know how difficult it is to draw glasses, but
I mean, I wouldn't think it would be that difficult, but I
I
mean, who knows? Yeah, I mean, I just
so
wonder if like there's some guy up higher that's going, oh well, we can't show her with glasses on because
yeah, yeah.
that would be terrible, and
And
it's like,
you go down the street, and even in the 20s, you'd go down the street, and there's a lot of women with
yeah.
glasses. But okay, I,
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, and I will say that's one good thing about being a smaller press because I don't have anybody above me going, oh, well, you can't do this. You can't show this on the cover, because I'm the guy that's, it's like, yeah, you can show her with glass,
Although, to be honest, having said that, I can't remember if Grace's picture of her, and because there's one picture of Russell in the dressing, I mean, in the bolt hole.
She's in yeah, in the bolt hole, but I think she's putting eye makeup on, so she
Yeah,
probably doesn't.
I
In
think the
my
glasses are.
memory, I'd have to pull up the art again to
I
look, but
think the
I think
glasses are
she's
on the
putting like
table.
eyeliner on, yeah,
Yeah, I think the glasses are on the table.
on the table, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Now there is another picture of the one where she's up in the tree at the house where the guy's shining the light out. But again, it's a younger Russell, and who knows? I honestly can't remember if she had glasses on in that illustration or not either. But I think those are the only two pictures of Russell in the book. I'd have to look again, but
Okay,
I
I'm
don't
looking
remember
at
if she had the glasses on in the tree or
I'm
not,
looking at my
honestly.
folder. She doesn't have glasses on, but you're seeing her from behind.
Okay, yeah. So,
So,
but then the
and
bolt hole one.
the bolt hole one, there's
Like I said, I think she's putting on eye makeup or doing something with
yeah,
makeup.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure the glasses are there somewhere. They're my own glasses are not. So yes, it's
But yeah,
looking at the folder. So, but
so yeah, but I mean, like I said, it would never occur to me to go, oh well, you can't show Mary Russell with glasses on, even though it's like everybody knows she wears glasses. If you've read the books, you know she wears glasses. And what difference does it make? But whatever, I guess,
yeah.
like I said, that's a good thing about being the guy that makes those decisions. I guess
I
it
love
wouldn't be.
running contests because there's so many
Yeah,
people who love the Russell things and who are
mhm,
creative on their own right. And so
yeah,
we often run a contest of, my favorite library or my fantasy library, or
yeah.
when we had Dreaming Spies was a few years ago, um, and it was set partly in Japan. And so we had a haiku contest. So people
Ah,
had to write
okay,
haiku.
yeah,
And I always loved the ones where we would run a contest that had to do with visual images, because to see what people came up with and
right.
what she looked like was always so interesting. It's always to know that this character lives in people's imaginations is
Yeah.
deeply satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to me, yeah, that would be kind of cool to know that you have created something that people, yeah, they have a little avatar that they've created in their mind of what this person looks like and what they sound like and what they, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's kind of like telepathy, I guess, where you're sending an image out, and there is obviously some, everybody's got their own, way of translating it, I guess, which is another cool thing because it's,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of like when they have that somebody will start the discussion of they'll see an actress they think would make a great Russell. And
yeah,
so they'll post her picture up, and there's the enormous discussion of, well, she couldn't be, and well, oh, and then I listened to a tape of her, and she sounds good, and she,
yeah. But every little thing is scrutinized. Yeah,
yes, lengthy discussions on, who would play Russell and Holmes in the movie. So
yeah. Has there ever been any kind of interest from any studios in making like a
every so
movie or
often,
a series or?
yeah, every so often. I mean, there's a novel going on at the moment that hasn't gone into a contract, so we had one that I was really sad about because it was a really interesting bunch of people, and they had some ideas that I loved.
Yeah.
Um, and it was English, so it would have been, really great to have that English vibe. But it was just it ran into COVID, and
Mm,
whole what COVID did to the industry was just you couldn't
yeah.
predict. I mean, it was as bad as the tariffs
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because it meant that when we were coming out of COVID, everyone thought, oh, good, things will be new again. The problem was that all of the projects that had been sort of like three-quarters finished,
Yeah.
all of a sudden had to be reworked and rewritten. And you had to, so
Yeah.
that all of the script writers had to be busy on projects that they were finished with 3 years
Yeah.
ago. And so it just, all the
Yeah.
projects that were at the beginning stages, first you had COVID and then there was the writer's strike and then so yeah,
Yeah.
it was too bad because I thought it was one of those that sounded like it would be an interesting group of people
Yeah.
to turn over your baby to, which I've talked to a lot of people in the film and TV industry, and there's a lot of people that you think you you really don't get this character, do you?
Yeah.
And
Unfortunately, I think that happens more often than the other way around. It sounds like
yeah,
I've never dealt with it, but it just
yeah,
sounds like, yeah, it's more
yeah,
of,
it's
hey, can we sell this and get people to watch it, and not, hey, are we serving this property correctly? Are we,
yeah,
it's more of, and I get it, it's a business and they're trying to make money, but it just seems like that's, just like a lot of stuff, that's kind of the overarching,
yeah, yeah, and
issue is,
I
can
think
we
that
make money off of it? And
sure,
it's,
and I think that for the Russell stuff, it would be good to have somebody who understands what's
yeah.
going on in those books, and
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's because yeah, because I feel like if not done correctly, it would just be another, you know, you could very easily turn it into just another, oh, it's just more, it's just Sherlock Holmes. It's just another Sherlock Holmes thing. And that's,
yeah,
I just feel like it's more than that, obviously because of, obviously for a big part because of Mary's, you know, character and what she brings to the book. And I don't know. I just always feel like maybe somebody would go, "Oh, this is a Sherlock Holmes property," and that's what they would lean on. That it would be
yeah.
kind of the
Oh, I think that's very true. They probably would.
yeah,
But that's why I always, from the beginning, I have had her have first billing on the
yeah,
covers is
yeah,
Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes. So because they're Russell stories, and
yeah, yeah. I mean,
he is more of an active character now than he was in the first half
sure,
dozen. I mean, the first half dozen, he you never really saw him except through her eyes.
right,
And he would, if he was off doing some form of investigation, he would come back and bring her the information, or he'd leave
yeah,
her a note or a message of some kind.
yeah.
Um,
He was just
Starting in I guess it must have been around Locked Rooms, where she's an unreliable narrator because her own past is interfering with
right
how
with the
how she's
investigation.
remembering.
Yeah,
Um, that you have to see him
yeah,
in
by
order to
himself. Yeah,
see the correct, the truth that is actual rather than the truth that she
right,
remembers.
yeah,
And I found that such an interesting experience to write Holmes as somebody standing from the outside that I sort of started doing that in most of the books now. They have chapters where you're just looking at Holmes,
yeah,
and he's third person.
yeah.
He's first person, so but he's third person.
He's third person, but yeah,
And
he's
the
a
new
little more
book, which is
unfiltered.
this one here, it's coming out in June.
Yeah, that's the
Knave of Diamonds.
Knave of
It actually
Diamonds.
has three voices in it. It has Russell, which is first person, and it has Holmes, third person. But you also get her uncle Jake, who's this American ne'er-do-well,
Ah,
and he gets his own chapters, and he's also third person. Or no, he's first person. Sorry, he's first person.
yeah.
So two first, and then Holmes is the third.
Holmes is third.
And
Yeah,
I was very pleased when they set up the audio book for this one because very sadly we lost our audio book, Mary Russell, 2
no,
years ago. And people found last year's book very difficult to adjust to because it's a different voice.
Different.
Also, she was not given any time to prepare. I mean,
It was, yeah, kind of a
Jenny
last minute.
Sterling, yeah, Jenny Sterling died in December, and the book came out in February, which
Oh yeah,
you
that's not
know,
a lot of
that
time, is
means
it?
here you walk in the door, kind of shove her in the door with the pages, and there you
Yeah,
are. This one she will have had more of a chance to adjust and settle into
yeah.
the role, so I think it'll be better. And they have two other characters, one for Holmes and one for Jake. So
Oh,
it's
okay,
going
nice.
to be the three of them, and it'll
Almost
be
kind
fun.
of like a radio play, almost instead of a, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, which
yeah.
is great. Yeah,
So
excellent. Looks like we're almost in the time. But so when is the last this book's coming out in July? You said the Knave of Diamonds?
June 10th,
June, June 10th. Okay.
2025 is Knave of Diamonds.
So
Uh,
is this going to be the last Mary Russell book, or do you have more waiting in the wings? Do you have other
if I
ideas that
drop
you're?
dead before number 20, yeah, but I don't intend to. So
Yeah.
no, yeah.
I mean,
The
yeah,
next,
you just never
no,
know. I
yeah.
mean, I didn't know if you were going to do a
The one
Conan
that I'm
Doyle
working
and
on, yeah,
decide to
the one
push
that
her
I'm
off.
working on is not a Russell.
Yeah, 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 right.
It's the
But
Raquel Lang. But and I don't the other one, I mean, I don't have a new contract because I haven't written out the old contract yet,
sure.
but
Yeah.
I do intend to have, so this is 2025, 2026 will be Raquel Lang too. And
Okay.
so probably 2027 there'll be an anthology, short story collection of
Okay.
Russell and Holmes and a
Nice.
couple of other stories, non-Russell. And I think that we will try to have the novel out in the fall
Okay.
of 2027. So
27.
it
Okay.
sort of depends. I've written all the short stories, they're all
Yeah.
out of the way. So
They're there. Just need to be
yeah. So
collected and published and yeah.
yeah. So but
Gotcha.
number 20, Russell and Holmes will.
Okay. Well, that's good. No, that's great. I'm glad obviously I'm glad that you're still. I just didn't know, like I said, sometimes it's, one of those things where it's like, you know, I want to do something else or I'm tired of.
It's the last couple have been difficult because I normally travel for the books. I normally
Okay.
travel and do research, and
Right.
I couldn't travel at all during COVID,
COVID.
hence the Raquel Lang, which
Yeah.
is local. And I've had some health issues the last couple of
Yeah.
years that make travel. I mean,
Difficult. And
travel is never easy,
no. Yeah.
but when your back is not happy, it's even uneasier.
Yeah. It's worse.
So,
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, yeah, especially if you're going to travel by plane or, anything that's, yeah, I mean, those are cramped
yeah,
enough as it is, but I can't imagine having back issues and trying to, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
stuff yourself into an airplane to go somewhere. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Forget
Anyway.
it. So, well, great. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear there's more coming. I'm glad to hear that you're working on, new standalone stuff and other projects as well. But that's
We
good news. We're happy to hear that there's more Russell coming. So
we keep turning out the words.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out to talking with us. We appreciate it. And what's your website is
LaurieRking.com.
LaurieRking.com. So okay, so anybody can go there to kind of catch up on news and
And there you can
there's
find excerpts of most of the books, links, and
okay,
there's a couple of pages of just fun stuff,
okay,
art projects, and collections of haiku. And there's an origami that you can make,
nice. It's a
and
multi-purpose website.
book club kits, which are fun because there's a lot
Awesome.
of book clubs who read,
Okay,
especially Beekeeper.
right,
So.
absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I thank you, Travis. It's been fun, and I'm
Yeah,
really looking forward to holding the
yes,
illustrated in my hands.
yes, it will come to fruition eventually, but just like I said, just slower than we'd hoped, but we're gonna get there. So,
Yeah. It's
all
been
right.
promised, and
Yep, we're
it,
gonna do it.
it's
It's
coming.
yeah. All right. Well, hope the rest of your weekend's great, and we'll talk again.
You too, and
Uh,
thanks everyone. If there's anyone out there joining us,
appreciate
thank
it. All right. Bye bye.
you.